Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 786A, and today's date is October 8th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Financial Numbers Are Manipulated to Keep Everyone in This Illusion of a Recovery. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we have been seeing the economy collapse right in front of our eyes. I mean, we've been looking at economic indicators. We've been looking through what the government throws at us. Of course, they manipulate a lot of their data to make us think that everything is fine. And what we've been seeing is that they are continually manipulating these numbers like unemployment, GDP, inflation. The banks are solvent. The stock market is really doing well. Precious metals aren't worth anything. And they are continually doing this. And what we're finding out is that they just don't lie about what's happening across the world. They lie about what is actually happening here in America. And that is the economy is collapsing. And they want us to believe that we're in this fantastic recovery and everything is absolutely fine. The rest of the world is having the problem, but not here in the United States. And every time we look at this information that they throw at us, it doesn't make sense. And when we look at these new initial jobless claims, they're saying that they've tumbled back to 42-year lows. And we have to think, how could this possibly be? That means no one is getting laid off. That means no one is applying for these unemployment claims. And everything is fine. The job market is perfect. But we have to remember, and I've said this many times, they removed that department that counts layoffs back in 2013. Of course, they said, oh, it's budget cuts, but they kept the golf courses, the restaurants, the limousines that bring them to different places, the payment for hotels, the payment for airlines that bring them certain places. But the office that counts those people losing their jobs, that office had to go, which is strange in itself. So we have to rely on private companies like Challenger Gray and Christmas. And they've come out with their numbers, and we are seeing huge layoffs. Now, the government is telling us that the initial claims dropped 13,000 this week to 263,000. And this is bringing us back to 1973 levels. But when we look at what has been going on, and let's go back to June of 2014 at the number of layoffs. And we're going to go forward here. We see in June we had about 31,000. July was about 46. August 40. September 30. October 51,000. This is October of 2014. And we see this all the way up until this September. And some of the months are 50,000. Some are as low as 30,000. And then we had a big jump in July of about 105,000 jobs. This month in September, we're at 58,877. But when we add all this up from June 2014 to September of 2015, it's 750,000 jobs. We are on track right now to hit about 1 million people who've been laid off. So, what are we seeing here? We're seeing the government is telling us that nobody is applying for unemployment. Now, I'm going to use common sense here and say this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, let's look at this for a second. The third quarter ended with a surge in job cuts. They cut about 58,877 in September, which is a 43% increase from the previous month. And this is coming from Challenger Gray and Christmas because the government doesn't have a reporting office. So the September total was the third largest of the year behind July, which was 105, which we just mentioned. It was 93% higher than the 30,000 planned layoffs the same month a year ago. So we're seeing job cuts increase dramatically, and we're seeing initial jobless claims decrease dramatically. So who's lying here? Is it the government or this private company, which they really have nothing to gain from this? They're just reporting these numbers. What does the government have to gain? Well, the Obama administration shows that we're in an economic recovery by manipulating these numbers. That's the motive right here. And this is exactly what we're seeing. I mean, think about this for a second. We've had almost 1 million jobs removed from the country. And no one is going to the unemployment office. We're at 42 or 43-year lows. It just doesn't make sense. Just like everything else they're throwing at us, it doesn't make sense. And this shows us, once again, the government is lying to its own people. And the last time I looked in the Constitution, it doesn't say anything about the government lying to the people. It says the government should be working for the people. But we see the government is on a different track than the people of the United States. We see student homelessness. This has doubled since before the recession. The number of homeless students in the country classrooms has more than doubled. And we went from, in 2006, we went from about 0.6 million students who are homeless. And as of 2014 right now, we're at 1.3 million students who are homeless. So what is this telling us? This is saying that the economy right now, as we go along in this recovery, which there is no recovery, it is getting a lot worse. When we look at what's really going on out in the real world, compared to what the government is telling us, we see a completely different picture. And we know by looking at all this, by looking at the real information, and we know the real information tells us that unemployment is nowhere near 5.1%. It's completely impossible. I mean, if we just do the calculation with the people that were laid off and the people who are getting hired, and if we remove the manipulation of those people who are getting part-time jobs, who are counted as full-time jobs, we see a very different story. We see the unemployment rate closer to 30%. Now, if we use that number, that makes sense now, because we're seeing retail contract. We're seeing more and more people being laid off. We see spending is slowing. We see factory orders and manufacturing declining. We see the Baltic Dry Index falling. We see housing sales are non-existent to the American everyday person. The only reason the houses are being sold, it's because foreigners, investment companies, hedge funds are coming in with cash to purchase these homes. If you strip them out, the housing market is dead. The banks kept houses off the market on purpose to increase the prices of homes. And now we're getting word from a U.S. retail group, and they're saying that this holiday season is going to be awful. Now, of course, they say it's going to be a slower growth this holiday season, and what they really mean, it's really going to be terrible. The NRF said holiday sales will account for 19% of the industry's $3.2 trillion in annual sales. Many retailers earn an outsized portion of their profits during this holiday season. So if they don't hit their mark this holiday season, we are going to see a mass number of stores closing. Other groups have also forecast slower growth this holiday season. Alex Partners, their forecast is about 2.8% growth this holiday season compared to last year, which was 4.4%. Previous to that, it was close to 6, then 8. So the unemployment rate is coming down, And we're seeing the growth of sales during the holiday seasons drop each year. Using common sense once again, this tells us that yes, unemployment is closer to the 30% mark and not the 5.1%. Because this is something that you would see if more and more people are unemployed, more and more people have part-time jobs, more and more people don't have discretionary funds. I mean, the government is just taking everything and lying about it. Now, there was another survey done which shows that 2 out of 3 Americans have $1,000 or less in their savings account. So, okay, so now we have this included in our entire view of what's really going on. People don't even have money in their savings account. Most of their credit cards are topped off. They have no room left because they've been using it to survive. And we're seeing that these people, they're not going to go out and spend during this holiday season. Whatever they're going to do is they're just trying to get by every single day. And we see that this 1 in 5 is really 62% of Americans that don't have $1,000 in their savings. A lot of them don't have any cash reserves to cover any type of an emergency that comes up. And from all of this, we see that this economy cannot recover this way. We are in a slow grind down into a collapse. For all intents and purposes, we have collapsed. We are in a depression, and we have been in a very long time. The government has been keeping everyone in an illusion. But what's happening now is we're seeing cracks all over the place. We're seeing banks, companies starting to really feel this depression. And a lot of these retailers, a lot of these corporations that are laying off thousands upon thousands of people, they're not going to be able to survive. I mean, we're getting word from Deutsche Bank. I mean, they have losses that reach $7 billion. We see Switzerland's second biggest bank, UBS, and Credit Suisse. They have admitted they need more cash. They need to bring in cash or they're pretty much done. So we're seeing the market fluctuate. I mean, the government is doing whatever they possibly can to keep this market up. The high-frequency traders, the plunge protection team, they're going to continually try to push this market up and manipulate it, just like they're manipulating everything else. Now, some days they're going to be able to push it up. Other days, as more and more retailers are selling their stock, they're going to have a little bit of trouble. But once again, the market is the only thing these central bankers have left to keep this illusion alive. I mean, we are definitely seeing signs of a huge crisis headed our way. I mean, we have Glencore, we have Deutsche Bank, we have UBS, Credit Suisse, all on the verge of basically doing a Lehman. Now, we don't know which of these corporations this is going to happen to, but we are right at the cusp of it happening. And something very strange occurred in the banking system in September that required a massive reverse repo operation in order to force the largest ever Treasury collateral injection into the repo market. Ordinarily, the Fed might engage in routine reverse repos as a means of managing the Fed funds rate. However, there have been sudden spikes up in the amount of reverse repos that tend to correspond to some type of crisis. And of course, we saw it back in 2008. And just recently, we saw a huge spike of about 405 billion over 2 weeks. And this is huge compared to what happened in 2008, where it was only about 100 billion. So something big just happened. And what's even more interesting is that the spike up in reverse repos occurred at the same time, September 16th, that the stock market embarked on an 8-day cliff dive, with the S&P 500 falling 6% in that time period. And this is also at the same time that Glencore stock and bonds crashed. And we saw this happen back in 2008, but this time it was much, much larger, about 4 to 5 times larger. And this is red flashing lights all over the place, that something huge is coming. Now, China, they are going to launch their own Yuan-based international payment system, CIPS. And they've launched it today in Shanghai, which will allow cross-border transactions in the Chinese national currency, the Yuan. Now, CIPS first phase provides clearing and settlement services according to the People's Bank of China announcement. It launched to remove hurdles to the yuan's internationalization by reducing transaction costs and processing times, completely bypassing the dollar. 19 major banks were named as direct participants, 38 Chinese banks, and up to 140 foreign financial institutions are named as indirect partners. CIPS is vying to overtake the SWIFT system in the region. IKEA is already using it. And let me just say, the private Western Central Bank establishment does not want this to happen, because this will boost the yuan trading across the globe. And they definitely do not want this to occur. And we can see this by what is happening around the world. They are pushing and provoking in every corner of the world. We understand that the TPP was signed by 12 different nations. They left out China. They left out pretty much the BRIC nations. And the reason they're doing this is to remove China and the BRIC nations from the trading platform. And they're trying to lock it in with all the other countries. Now, of course, China is out there trying to create their own. And they're trying to divert trade to China and the other BRIC nations. And we know the TPP is done in secret. We know it's not for the people. And there's a lot of different sections that have nothing to do with trade. I mean, one of the sections has to do with internet censorship. And this will allow corporations to go after different groups. And it will allow them to go after punitive damages against groups like public advocacy groups, bloggers, websites, individual journalists for exposing wrongdoing by, among others, corporate polluters, manufacturers of unsafe items, the genetically modified food industry, and even governments. Critics of the TPP argue because the agreement is a huge giveaway to corporations at the expense of the general public, freedom of expression and speech on the internet will suffer. So those people who are talking about the government and other corporations and don't agree with their views, they could basically stop them on the internet and go after them for speaking your mind. There is also a clear danger that the entertainment industry and their intellectual property lawyers will try to use the TPP to enact the Stop Online Privacy Act, which is SOPA, which did not pass Congress. But if it's introduced in the TPP, guess what? They're not going to see it. It's going to be buried, and it's going to go right through if Congress signs off on it. And we mentioned about the copyright laws. That's another problem. So what they're trying to do, and I mentioned this before, is the government has the ability to create, not the government, the central bankers have the ability to create money. They control the corporate media. The last thing they need to do is to control the internet. And this is what they're trying to do. And of course, they're doing it in a way that nobody knows what's really going on, because this whole thing's kept a secret. The people don't know what's going on. And I'm sure if we were able to read the TPP, we would find so many different sections that the people would not agree with, that this would never be passed. And hopefully Congress does the right thing. But at this point in time, I really don't think they will. Look what they did with Obamacare. They went ahead, they passed it, and none of them even read it. What do you think is going to happen with the TPP? They're not going to read it, and most likely they'll just let it go right through. Because why? They're not working for the people. They're working for themselves. If they were working for the people, they would sit there, read it. Does this benefit the people of the United States? And they would find out, no, it does not. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.